Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy Podcast. My name is Jed, and today we are reading Philosophical Midwifery. We are in Chapter 2. We are learning about the pathologos, which is the big thing, the big fish we want to catch. And we have just read about the functioning of amnesia. And as we have been learning about both in this channel and in our philosophy reading, the process of reading involves having your nose in the text, reading the words as they are, without interpretation, which means without adding things that are not there, and without leaving out things that are. But once you've collected the terms, organizing them. Can you arrange the terms you've collected into a dialectic? That's the necessary condition for understanding. And last time, we saw the word dialectic come up in the text. Let's pull it up. Amnesia serves the needs of the pathologos because it disguises from us the true dynamics of these past learning situations. Once we impartially review these interpretations, that's without impartially, which means without interpretations, they fall by themselves. So it's our false interpretation. In other words, what we are learning about reading, to see what's there without leaving out things that are, and by adding things that aren't, that's how we're learning to read. That's what we want to apply to that early scene, because it was exactly that act of interpretation that caused us to conclude in a false way. In other words, we added things that weren't there. Truth, beauty, care, love, they weren't there. They were only imitations. And we left out things that were there. We sacrificed our own understanding about ourselves. We sacrificed our own knowledge from our own experience. We sacrificed our own goals. And we sacrificed the fact that we actually saw what was going on. We just gave them the benefit of the doubt and took the blame ourselves. So interpretation is where it comes down to. Our problems are caused by a false interpretation, and by learning to read without interpretation, we're able to address that past scene in a way that'll free us from our problems, which is fantastic. To have heavily interpreted past is to live in shadows. We are living a shadow of a life, a shadow of ourselves, but also, as we've been understanding, that shadow dialectic is down here. Our fate, the life lived as a dialectic to become what is false, in other words, to live a life that makes you more unjust, more ignorant, more harmful, more harmed, is a shadow of the life we should be living, because this ladder casts the shadow onto the ground to create the train tracks of fate. So that's the idea of a shadow. We are living in the shadow realm. To live in shadows, to have a heavily interpreted past is to live in the shadows of pathologos belief. Once again, beliefs chain us, understanding frees us. As long as we reside in that realm, we forget ourselves. The situation or the event in which we accepted the pathologos contains the onset of our amnesia, but we forget that it was our decision. We forget that we have the power. It was our decision to accept an interpretation that binds us. So what? Well, one way of understanding the quest that we are on as human beings is to accept the opposite, to accept seeing, to accept reading, to accept the logos, to accept seeing and reading without interpretation. That frees us. In a similar way that we accepted an interpretation that bound us and continues to bind us. We did accept it. We are responsible for our own condition. So another reason why we don't play the blame game. To unravel that, even to us, We're understanding, not blaming ourselves. To unravel that moment of the decision and to discover its enduring significance upon us is the task of the dialectic. So this is our way out. As we just said, belief is what binds, understanding is what frees. What is understanding? The dialectic. That's the structure of the dialectic. So we have to unravel. We have to discover its significance. So unravel the moment and see its consequences. That's the task of the dialectic. So what? Well, the dialectic is the antidote to the false interpretation, but also it's part of reading. So you could start by collecting terms without interpretation. Pull out the terms that are there. You don't agree with some of the terms? Oh well, pull them out anyway. We're not interested in your beliefs, we're interested in truth. In fact, we're interested in overcoming the beliefs that we're attached to evolve, to become better. And learning something new requires sacrificing the attachment and the allegiance to what is false. Sounds rational, but we're human beings. We can act in the most immature way to stay loyal to what's stupid and wrong just because we happen to believe them. And hey, if you were born in a different house, in a different country, in a different time, or on a different planet, you wouldn't have those dumb beliefs you're attached to. Now, I call them dumb beliefs because I'm trying to build a separation from them. We shouldn't be precious about them. Everyone's entitled to their own belief. Hey, if I want to believe racist stuff, I have a right to. That kind of stuff. Why are you precious about beliefs? We don't get precious about that anywhere else. When we learn how to be a vet, we don't hold on to childish, false beliefs about pigs coming from a cabbage patch. I don't know if any kid believes that. Who knows what you believe? In other words, beliefs are wrong. They don't have to be right. You could happen to be right if you get lucky, but it's insignificant. It's unrelated to truth. It's inconsequential. We think that they're true. That's what gives them its staying power. So by calling them dumb, I'm trying to point to the fact that don't be precious. Hey, if a child who wants to be a vet thinks that cats marry dogs, you going to allow that because everyone's entitled to their own opinion? Imagine if they actually had to practice veterinary medicine. What would be the significance of that? It doesn't help anyone. So why care? Oh, because they love it. So? A murderer loves murder. Do we allow that because they happen to be fond of it? So what we are doing instead is learning how to unbind ourselves from that loyalty to be free to actually love what's true. And that's understanding. So we call it philosophia, the love of wisdom, but what we might actually want to call it is philodianoia, the love of understanding. And that is the use of the dialectic. So just as the dialectic is what we need to do to go back to that origin scene, to undo that false interpretation, so too the dialectic is what we use to read. Once we've collected the terms, yes, even the terms we don't already agree with, good. What would be the point of learning it if you knew it already? Or you think you knew it already. So collect the terms, but then organize the terms. Make it your own. Well, when I say make it your own, I don't mean make it your own beliefs. Make it your own understanding. See how those parts fit together within a coherent whole. That's the dialectic. And you're also practicing the art we're here to practice. That's the way of reading. So, we just read through the amnesia part, which means you can go back to the previous episode and use that material to pull out the key terms yourself. In other words, do it yourself. You are here to master the dialectic. You are here to become a master midwife. you are here to use that development of the dialectic to lead you to the truth of self and reality. But because you've reached that experience or nous or enlightenment through the dialectic, through understanding, you can make sense of it when you've reached it. And you can use that understanding to integrate it into your way of being and use that insight artfully to benefit yourself and others. This is mastership. This is learning. This is what we're here for. This is the next step in our human evolution, and this is the next step in our personal development and our spiritual growth. So, we could do it together, but last time was a pretty relatively short one compared to that longer section on the transmission of the Pathologos, so maybe you could do it yourself. And if you do, feel free to share your work on the channel. You could share a link to a Google Doc or something in the comment section. This is my dialectic, which would be benefiting you, because part of the game is not just knowing, but showing the self, developing your dialectic, but sharing it. We are not in this alone. Philosophy is not a solo quest. It's not a one-person game. But also you're benefiting others. It's win-win. Because they might learn more about how to structure the dialectic. They might develop an understanding. They might even memorize your dialectic and carry that with them for a while. Until, of course, they learn something new and they can go back and do another one and another one. Dialectics are recursive or evolving. They evolve up, spiral upwards. Every new dialectic might lead to a new understanding, which means opportunity for a new dialectic. So, share it with the comments, share it with the community if you want to. You can join the Discord, there should be a link below somewhere, and you can share your work there. Lots of fun. And of course, it's the exact same thing we're doing when we're reading and converting our reading into dianoia through dialectic in our other channel on the Logos. So as we do to the reading of the Pathologos, so too do we do to the reading of the Logos. So, which gives us two parts, which mirrors the dialectic itself, side A and side B, what is and what isn't. So that even that activity is recursive. The thing that we are doing, in doing it, we are ourselves being a model of that thing we're doing, which means we will be better at doing that thing, but also ourselves will becoming a better being of that thing. Isn't that interesting? What do you say, Owen? Alright, so the next section is the wordless transmission. Part 4, I think there are 11 parts in this chapter, the big chapter, key chapter, the wordless transmission. So, excited. Let's jump in. The wordless transmission. Fourth, the transmission of a pathologos is something one concluded about in silence. It was never discussed. Reminder again, everything we do of the negative, we can ask a question or gain an insight about the positive. Which means, what should we be doing? What should we be doing if we want to be good people? Using our words. What do we look for in philosophy? The words. Why do we have to read the Balboa translation when we do philosophy? Because it has the right words. What do we do once we do learning, philomathesis? Collect the words. What do we do with the how do we use the dialectic? Structure and organize our words. What do we do when we have done that? We share our words in the comment section or over coffee with our friend. These are my words. This is what do we use words on? Our highest vision, insight, and understanding. It's all about the words. We are following the logos. If the what caused our problems, we didn't use our words. If the interpretations of these events had only been reflected upon by the family. So if you want to be a good parent or a member of a good family, or even group or even relation to yourself. What do you want to be doing as much as possible? Highlighting with my pen. And what do you want to be highlighting? Words and doing. What do you want to be doing? Discussion. Reflection. Reflection. Using the words and doing a lot of reflection. What do we call those two terms in philosophy? Logos and ousia. The two of the highest possible words and ideas that exist. Ousia, reflection, self-reflection. With what? With the words. So you want to be a good person to yourself? Reflect on your own thoughts and experiences. You want to be a good member of a group? Encourage reflection often. You want to have a good family? Reflect on events with words and create the conditions for that kind of reflection. If it had only been reflected on by the family, the pathologos would be deprived of the condition necessary for its existence. Wow! Imagine that, growing up pathologos free. The common feature of every pathologos, its distinguishing feature. So remember, every pathologos is different, like a snowflake, but there are common features, of course. That allows us to understand and use it as an art. The common feature, its distinguishing feature, is that the conclusion, that it is a conclusion about a most formative event of one's life, yet its content has never been expressed in words. Wow. The distinguishing feature of this pathologos, this new kind of human problems or new understanding of the cause of human problems, its distinguishing feature is that it's a conclusion, number one, about our most formative event in our life, number two, yet its content was never expressed in words. Again, so what should we do? Encourage reflection about the most formative or significant events, using the best words we know how. Are we learning how to be a good and virtuous person at the same time by learning about what happens? The worst things happen if we have the opposite. Interesting. So hey, on the positive, let's say you've had a really profound experience, a spiritual experience or an insight experience or a flow state experience or anything that you've deemed a beautiful experience. What do you want to do? Crush it? Tell people to shut up? Dismiss it? That's just chemicals? That's just your brain? That's just delusion? Make fun of it when others have a significant event? That's part of lots of cultures. Making fun of people for what's most meaningful and significant to them. What utter garbage. Those cultures need to freaking change. Why? Because the best thing we can do is to talk about what's most significant, to encourage talking about what's most significant, to reflect on what's most meaningful and significant, and use words. Learning how to describe. Ooh. Learning how to describe. That sounds like what we're doing. Learning how to describe what previously had never been expressed in words is the process of surfacing the pathologos. Yay, it's what we're doing. Further, while the scenes from which the pathologos emerges contains elements that can be recalled relatively easily. Okay, so there are elements that can be recalled relatively easily. The scenes from which the pathologos emerges. Notice the scenes themselves are not the pathologos. It's to create the conditions where we make this wordless conclusion. So some elements can be recalled easily, but the conclusions drawn from these scenes take much more reflection. And repeated examination before the conclusions are revealed, because their linkage to one another is never suspected. So there we're seeing more connections, more links between certain key events, key elements, which is exactly what we do in our reading. We pull out the key elements, we repeatedly review, recall, talk about what we've read, make notes, but we also have to link them together. That's the dialectic, that's part of reading, linking them together. And we see connections that haven't been suspected. But also this idea of it's a repeated examination. It's a relationship. You don't have one midwife talk and all of a sudden you're free of your problems. All of a sudden you're enlightened. It's a relationship. We are in time as human beings, we are. Therefore we have to choose what sort of thing do we want to be in a relationship with. Because we're alive in time, which means we have to be in a relationship with something. And the real question is, do we want to be in a relationship with a false idea of self and a false conclusion about self, the pathologos, or with the true nature of self and reality and the true logos of self and reality? Side A or side B? That's our choice. If you were Harry Potter, do you want to live a life under the staircase of the evil step-parents, or do you want to go to Hogwarts and become a wizard? But the important thing is it's a relationship. So if you're ever talking with somebody interested in this reflection, do your best to keep it as an ongoing relationship. You can challenge them and push them to come to conclusions, but keep in mind, this isn't a one-off. You got to come back. And if you are like, oh, that was really good, but I've seen enough. No, come back. Keep it going. In the relationship, create the conditions where it can be a continual relationship. Likewise, don't treat people like garbage. Don't say things like, shut up, get out of here. No midwifery for you. Like the soup Nazi, no soup for you. And if you recognize that as a principle, then you've got what you need to recognize, oh, I might myself be in a pathologos, which is something that we have to be aware of, because how do we keep the relationship alive? We both have to be in the game. You can't pretend you are the knower just because you are more informed. Problems come up, especially if you're doing what's most meaningful, and this is what's most meaningful. So ending the conversation, ending the relationship, considering the fact that it is a relationship, might be evidence of your own problem, which is fantastic because it gives us what we need to reflect, examine, discover, learn, which is what we're here for. They surface as, the linkages surface as the background thoughts of every... What? Oh, the background. Whoops, let's get a different color. What color? There we go. Okay. So the conclusions drawn take more reflection and repeated examination because the conclusions are revealed before the conclusions are revealed, because their linkages to one another is never suspected. They surface, so the conclusions surface as the background thoughts of our everyday life. So the background thoughts that we have are the conclusions we came to that we need to see. And upon reflection, they can be readily identified as familiar thoughts and images that often recur as repeated themes. So this is what we're looking for, repetition. Artfully, Plato and Socrates use it to teach us, but equally so, the negative art, the kakodaemon, uses repetition, repeated themes, repeated thoughts and images as a way of keeping us bound to what's false. Interesting. Among them are the repeated criticisms of oneself and others. Wow. So this is important. The background thoughts we have, especially the repeated themes and images, repeated thoughts, images, and themes, but especially the repeated criticisms that we have of ourselves and others. That's normal, that's natural, but our job is to recognize them, surface them, and pull out those repeating themes, thoughts, and images that are contained in them. You're a human being, you're going to do this. The thing is, what we want to know is, what way do I do it? Do I call everyone who disagrees with me a snowflake? Do I call everyone who, whenever I make a mistake, do I call myself garbage? You're garbage. Do I use words like disrespect as a way of taking my personal preferences and opinions and making them a universal law? Hey, I don't like that. I don't say that. I say, oh, you're disrespecting me by saying that, walking that way, being that skin color. You're disrespecting me, bro. Is that a repeated thought? We want to recognize our particular snowflake. Not snowflake as the kind of criticism that we can inflict on others, but in the kind of the unique nature of our particular pathologos. So that's interesting. And by the way, those repeated thoughts, images, themes, and criticisms of self and other are reflections of the conclusions that we came to that we need to surface. Among them are repeated criticisms of oneself and others, and taken together, they constitute the surface of the more visible aspect of the pathologos. So that's the surface that can be seen more visibly. Taken all these criticism, thoughts, images, and themes together. We are on the hunt. We are collecting clues. We are in the game. Okay. So, next section. When subjects make a statement describing the nature of their present problem, these very elements often reappear as, okay, so we're using the word subjects to point to what we might otherwise call the pregnant party. Because pregnant party, or PP, is the word that we are sometimes used because when you're the subject going through midwifery, you are recognizing you're pregnant with a false idea you want to surface and get rid of. But we can also use the word subject. When subjects make a statement describing the nature of their present problem, these very elements often reappear as criticisms and condemnations of themselves. So the way that we describe the nature of our problem also reflects the pathologos, also reflect the kinds of criticisms and condemnations that we make of ourselves. What does that mean? This means the statements about the nature of a problem reflect those archetypal past scenes from which the pathologos was generated. Interesting. Archetypal past scenes. Are we criticizing them the way we were criticized before we generated the pathologos from that scene? or in which we generated the pathologos? Or are we reflecting the kinds of conclusions? Do we take the blame and say, I am brainless, giving the benefit of doubt to those con artists in those scenes, scammers? And is it that conclusion we reflect on ourselves? Oh, I've got a problem. Every time I go to work, I act in a brainless way. Is that a reflection of the conclusion? So we're wondering about, in what way do they reflect the archetypal past scenes? Therefore, when these statements are applied to the present, they are inconsistent with the present. You know what? Your problem isn't that you're brainless. It's a false interpretation. It's inconsistent. So we talk about carrying a false analogy with us to our life is the lesser reflecting the greater, or reflecting this archetypal past scene. But what are we doing? We are interpreting. We aren't seeing and reading. The statements are inconsistent with the present. We're adding what's not there or leaving out what is. In a certain kind of way that reflects our problem that we want to see. However, it should be borne in mind, Jason borne in mind, that the fundamental reason, see, that looks like that other color there. Okay. That other color's kind of dirty. Let's move this here. The fundamental reason, oh, that's another dirty green, some dirty colors. Get rid of dirty green, don't like it. Bring a nicer green. The fundamental reason the problem is a problem is because the subject, without knowing it, is constantly trying to understand the present in terms of a misunderstood past. There we go. There's our false analogy that we carry. Analogy, as we've been seeing, is key to thinking, key to learning, key to the dialectic and logos, key to our development, but also key to our problem. So in other words, we have a fantastic fundamental feature of our soul that allows for learning, growth, and development called analogy. But our problem is it's being misused. Equally so, you could say, well, there's a fantastic principle of the universe allowing for a archetype of spirituality, an archetype of understanding. We can unite ourselves and all of humanity and put an end to conflict and division and war, exploitation, capitalism and fascism, simply by uniting under something which is a archetype of spirituality, an archetype of understanding. That's called the dialectic. We are all a walking dialectic. The only issue is we are applying it to what's false. The false belief about ourselves from these conclusions we're learning about and the pathologos. Equally so, we have this thing called analogy allowing us to carry with us our insights and our experiences and our spiritual experiences. The only problem is we're applying it to what's false. We're applying our analogy, our ability to understand the present in terms of a greater, to a misunderstood past instead of the truth about self and reality. Further, since these conclusions contain elements that are contradictory with one's primary belief system, they remain incomprehensible. What? To the subject, and so are the cause of much distress and grief. Some people, the trendy buzzword of the time at the time of recording is cognitive dissonance. Contradictory things, things that are elements that are contradictory, so the conclusions contain elements that are contradictory with our primary belief system, and therefore remain incomprehensible. We can't see it and understand it, and also cause us much distress and grief. Cognitive dissonance and the distress and grief that comes as a result. The way we have come to understand ourselves, the images and attitudes we present to others, these are based upon primary beliefs about ourselves. Much as different colored threads of a tapestry present images to viewers. Oh, that's a nice analogy. So our images, attitudes, so the way we understand ourselves, the images and attitudes are presented to others in a similar way as colored threads present images to viewers. Interesting. We present ourselves as a multicolored tapestry, not of colored threads, but of images and attitudes we present. The conclusions one draws about one's current problems are confused as the parts are irreconcilable. So our conclusions about our problems are wrong. We don't understand our problems. Curiously, and if you've ever known someone or had a friend who's been in a problem, you recognize this. They have a problem and you want to talk to them about it, and they're always, oh no, I know what my problem is. I know how to fix my problem. And you go, dude, if you knew that, you wouldn't have your problem. No, I know. You don't. Why? Because your conclusions about your current problem are confused as the parts are irreconcilable. You're interpreting. Curiously, they seem to be answers, yet they don't function like answers because they don't work. And this is what we just said. Hey, you don't have an answer to your problem because they're not functioning as an answer. It's not working. You still have your problem. Oh no, but I know. No, you don't know. Otherwise you wouldn't have the problem. It's not working as an answer. But also it can't work because the nature of problems itself. You are ignorant of the nature of pathologos. So, have a coffee with me and let's do some reflection and learning. We repeatedly give ourselves the same answers to our present problem, yet the problem persists. In the past, these answers worked in a way. They were the ones we offered ourselves, and they obscure the event. Right? You might have called, you had a problem. Oh, the problem is because I'm clumsy. The problem is because I'm an introvert. The problem is because I'm on the spectrum. In the past, they may have worked to obscure the event, give you a nice label to, I don't know, dismiss the problem, ignore the problem, stay in your problem. They should work now. Hey, maybe your parents kept calling you autistic, kept calling you a slow learner, kept calling you a problem child. They should work now. They worked at home in the past, but they fail now. So this false understanding, poor conclusions, poor answers to the problems that we have, worked in a kind of way that no longer do. So our problems are sort of solutions that no longer apply. The ensuing confusion and the ambiguities we face bring us to the thought that there is something unknowable and irrational about our existence. So this is a big one. So these people who can't be open-minded enough and curious enough to learn the midwifery and the pathologos, they offered themselves solutions that kind of worked to keep them alive in their childhood, but don't work. So they get stuck in their problems. They keep offering the same conclusions, they keep coming up with non-answers, and they keep getting remaining stuck. So what do they conclude? Either A, their beliefs are wrong, their conclusions are wrong, what might have worked in the past doesn't work anymore. But what's far more common is they'll say, well, that means the world is irrational. That means you can't understand problems. The amount of philosophers and psychotherapists who are professionals who say, oh, it's just unknowable simply because they are wrong. My goodness, it's tiring. You say, no, it's not unknowable. You just don't know. No, but if somebody would have known, I would have heard about it before. Bollocks. Just because you don't know, just because you're wrong, doesn't mean reality's wrong. Doesn't mean it's unknowable. This is a big one. Right? If you've known any sophists or con artists or grifters, whenever they're wrong about something or don't know, they'll always say, well, I still know everything because it's just unknowable. You can't know what happens when you die. You can't know the nature of the soul. You can't know the meaning of life. Those things are unknowable, or you can't understand them. They're irrational. Men's problems are irrational. It's cognitive emotive behavioral therapy. In other words, you can't just use cognitive to solve problems. You can't just use understanding. You have to say humans are irrational. Well, truth is, that's not the case, which is great. Now, what's really curious is, what would be the reaction to somebody hearing that? If you think, gee, reality or our problems or our reality is unknowable and irrational, and then someone came along and said, by the way, that's wrong, it's knowable and rational, the answer should be, yay! What I thought was not available to me is available to me. What I thought was unsolvable is solvable. What I thought was unknowable is knowable. That's fantastic news. That would be the rational response. Hey, you know how you thought you couldn't have an ice cream? Here's an ice cream. Wow. But curiously, interestingly enough, human beings are freaking weird in that you say, hey, here's an ice cream. They'll say, no, that ice cream doesn't exist. Screw you. Screw your methods. This is pseudo-intellectual nonsense. You're not a true academic. You're not a true spiritual person. What the heck? Just eat the ice cream. Be happy. Of course, that would be ignoring what we've understood about the pathologos. The pathologos is a blind spot. We don't know our conclusions. We don't know because they were wordless. We don't know we're carrying a false analogy, and we're fiercely loyal to what causes our ignorance, which is the height of immaturity and irrationality, but it's the human problem. We are fiercely loyal to our ignorance and our false beliefs. Why else would we be repeating the same problems over and over and over as a species? Fortunately, we have this book. We can understand why we are so stupid. Sorry, stupid is not the right word, because that implies we are irrational. There is a rationality behind our irrationality. So we can understand why. It's the pathologos. Consider because the whoops. Oh, that's the dirty green. Where's nice green? There we go. Because the pathologos is born from unspoken conclusions, it cannot be objects of reflection. That's a big one. Since it was never concluded in words. Ever tried to talk to our religious people about their dumb religious beliefs? Very hard, because their beliefs didn't come from words. That's why religious babies are born into the same religion as their parents. For until words are found to express something, it remains unavailable. So we need to find words to recollections. And it cannot become the object of reflection, nor can it be grasped by the understanding. So this is the key theme of today, words, the importance of words. Your conclusion wasn't in words, so you can't see it, you can't reflect on it. You can't notice that you're applying it to keep yourself stuck because you can't answer your problems. You're applying a false solution. And you can't even reflect on how ignorant you are being until you put words on it. When you put words on it, it can become an object of reflection and you can grasp it off through understanding. Even the false conclusion that you can't understand problems. You can even understand why you've come to that dumb conclusion. Okay? It takes many reflections and reformations of the pathologos to capture its essence. Again, you keep going like a dialectic and like a relationship until it gains that precision. The pathologos problem remains. As we have seen, to the degree that words reflect the reality of the pathologos, to that degree it can be grasped by the understanding. It's all about words. You keep reflecting, ousia, in a good relationship with yourself or with loved ones also in the game. That's the ousia, that's the self-reflection about what's most significant in words, and you keep doing it and you keep refining it, just like we've been saying about the dialectic spiraling up. You do a dialectic, well, you've got new understanding. You got new understanding, you do a new dialectic. So too about our pathologos. And to the degree that the words reflect their reality, so we want to be more and more precise in our words, to that degree it can be grasped by the understanding. All about words, my friend. While the pathologos functions as a wordless entity, it would be a mistake to think that the opposition experienced in the quest for the ideal is merely negative. There we go. There's our tying it back to our ideal. Our ideal relationship, our ideal enlightenment. Ideally, the quest for the ideal is Platonic philosophy in the Balboa translation. So, that's where we get our ideal of self and the logos. But we reach opposition. It ain't that easy. It's very easy to dismiss it, get angry, do something else. Write a nasty email to Socrates' manager and saying, oh, I don't like this. My dad said this, and my mum said this, and my mum was a saint. How dare Socrates say all this garbage? He's a communist. That could be one way of ending the game. But this opposition or these blocks is not merely negative. The opposition against fulfilling our dreams has a direction. There's a direction behind our blocks. The pathologos is not mindless. As we just said, there's a rationality behind our irrationality. And when we struggle against it, we are well aware that it has a considerable force. It has a big ass force. What? Further, this power is not an impersonal power. It's not impersonal, for it arouses emotional forces within us that are deep and mysterious. So it's not a random power. It pushes your buttons. It knows your buttons. It pushes you, and it stirs up all this energy that you might not normally have access to. It is one reason why people can get addicted to their pathologos. They might think that surge of energy is wisdom or knowledge. It ain't. Look how strong I am when I'm yelling at people, when I get triggered. Ever noticed that the most ignorant people, what we call conservatives or right-wing people, a lot of them are obsessed with attacking people. Oh, I'm going to vote for Trump, not because he's a good person, I know he's garbage, but I want to make other people suffer. I want to drink the tears of liberals. I'm against abortion, not because there's any medical merit or I'm a doctor or anything, but I just like oppressing women. Your body, my choice is the catchphrase that's being used now that Trump was re-elected at the time of the recording. So that these emotional forces that get arisen when we act in our worst ways can be an addiction, can be preyed on by grifters like Trump and other fascists and so on. In fact, that's capitalism right now. Late stage, hopefully, capitalism. Most reporting and news articles and the internet is all rage bait, because they know triggering people's emotional anger or conflicts or fear gets them to respond, gets them clicks. Getting them clicks get you advertisers. Getting you advertisers gets you money. Getting you money allows you to buy food and rent, because for some stupid reason it's not free. Allowing billionaires to become richer and the 90% of us to be suffering. Garbage, irrational garbage. But there's a rationality behind it. There's a rationality behind this rage bait. There's a rationality behind this cultural hellscape we live in. Our pathologos is not impersonal. It arouses these emotional forces within us. It sucks that it's being used for evil and not to benefit and help people, but that's what we're doing. We are better people. We are becoming better and hopefully being a force and influence for good in the world, because this would be using what is at the moment used for the worst of human nature to manipulate people so you can play out your pathologos, con people, grift people, lie to people, oppress people, get advertisers for capitalism. What would normally be used for that, we want to see the significance of our emotional energy that is triggered by our pathologos to surface clues about what we're here to learn. We are here to learn the nature of our particular pathologos that we get from childhood for a good reason, to help us free ourselves from what's false, but also master the dialectic, the method and art of that freedom, of that freeing. These emotional conflicts manifest as blocks experienced. There's our keyword block. When pursuing those goals, and those goals have to be most personally significant to us. If we don't care, we're not going to have those blocks. An analogy some people like to use is, hey, that girl that I really, really love and have been crushing on big time, when I try and talk to her, all my blocks come up. I feel like I'm stupid. I start to stutter. My hands get sweaty. Mum's spaghetti. But that girl that I don't like, the girl I'm not interested in, who's not beautiful to me, that's not personally significant to me, I can talk to her very easily. That's a fun analogy, but this is the significance of pursuing our most personally meaningful goals, which is ultimately the significance about being in philosophy, Platonic philosophy in the Balboa translation. Not other philosophies, which are just opinions. And not reading Plato, that's not the Balboa, so you get the wrong terms and you don't get the structure. Personally meaningful. personally significant. Is it possible that pathologos is an unconscious entity? If so, then it would be right to conclude it cannot be resolved by rational procedure. If the pathologos was unconscious, then it would be right to conclude it cannot be resolved by any rational procedure. The good thing is it can be. If that is the case, then our own reflections and theory are suspect. So it's a conscious entity. How many do we have in this paragraph? But okay, we'll finish a little bit more. Indeed, in the everyday course of events, the presence of the pathologos does seem to go undetected, but that is not to say that it is unconscious. So people often talk about our problems as being unconscious, or our problems being unconscious. It's not. We might not be detecting them. Learning how to describe what previously has never been expressed in words is the process of surfing the pathologos. So it's not unconscious, you just haven't learnt the process of putting language on it. You haven't been learning language. Just like people who say, you can't know God, says many atheists. That's not true. It is knowable. You just haven't learnt the language. What's the language? The logos. Can't solve problems. Yes, you can. You just haven't learned the language. Dreams are unconscious. Subconscious. Subconscious is the buzzword at the time of recording in our culture. Problems are subconscious, or dreams are subconscious. They're not. It's a buzzword. They're not subconscious or unconscious. You have to learn. The strange idea that certain things, to master medicine, you have to study. To master aviation and become a pilot, you have to study. To become a lawyer, you have to study. But for some reason, knowing the nature of God, the meaning of life, the meaning of your dreams, solving problems, somehow you don't have to study for that. And how to run a country, how to start a religion. You don't have to. Well, let's take out religion, because that doesn't necessarily mean the truth about the divine. It can just be manipulating people. But knowing how to solve problems, the nature of reality, the meaning of life, the nature of the divine, these things are the one group of things that doesn't have to be learned. You don't have to learn a language. You have to learn the language of aviation. You have to learn the language of medicine. If you want to become a musician, you have to learn the language of music. Very strange that this is the area that so this was our opening in chapter 1, right? If we can become mature and rational in many things, why does humanity remain immature and irrational in respect to ourselves? Why are we repeating the same problems, the same suffering and bloodshed and exploitation and fascism that we've been doing over and over for tens of thousands of years? Why can we be so mature and rational about everything except this? Ourselves, our nature of self, mind, and problems. In a word, or in two words, logos and pathologos. Good question. If we weren't being immature, we would say, of course, I am in no position to say you can't know God or reality and the self and problems if I haven't learnt the language. Just like I'm in no position to make medical claims without being a doctor. Whoops. Don't say that at the time of recording in 2024. Many people believe that they can just have their dumb opinions, and that makes them qualified of medicine. What do you say, Joe? But are you speaking from your medical expertise when you say you don't want to eat a monkey, Joe Rogan? Okay. Being wordless, it is unavailable to thought, and therefore it has the character of being unknown. Get them words in you. The existence of the pathologos, is not the product, interesting, of deep instinctual urgings, because we talked about the deep instinctual urge to be like or imitate our appearance of knowing from when we were kids, and how that's even stronger than the desire for actual truth and development. But here we're saying the pathologos is not the product of deep instinctual urgings. What? The conflict exists because the mind cannot abide with its own failure. The mind seeks the resolution of our problems. It presents us with the unsolved fragments in the everyday pattern of our thoughts, which occupy so much of our attention. They are presented to our consciousness as puzzles. To be solved. Interesting. So, why do we have problems? Because we are innately savages, because we have an original sin, because we're only half angels and half humans. No, it's because the mind will not abide by our failure. Our mind wants better for you. It's not going to ignore the problems that are limiting you. It's not going to be ignoring you cutting yourself down. It's not going to allow you to the injustice of hamstringing yourself, not being your true self. So it presents the problems to you. And it's just as we did today, it's not giving you the answer, just as we did with the amnesia section. I'm not going to do the dialectic for you, but I can present you the fragments, I can present the clues, I can highlight almost every word in that small section 3 on amnesia so that you can solve the puzzle, presenting the fragments to you, the puzzle pieces to you, so you can solve the puzzle. Our problems are puzzles, and it's kept alive in the everyday pattern of our thoughts. It's not bad. It's helping. If you're playing the game, if you're learning the language, there's the logos, and if you're solving the puzzles, there's the dialectic. It's just the dialectic and logos, people. Got to be in the game. These fragments are reminders. Fragments are reminders of what needs completion. And that is only possible when we bring together all the parts into a meaningful unity. Parts into a meaningful unity. How do we organize? How do we read? See the terms that are there. Those are the parts. How do we what do we do with those parts to make it actual learning and philosophy? Organize it into a meaningful unity. What's our process of doing that? That's the dialectic. It is those parts that have not yet been put into words that we experience as states of mind. So that's the interplay of the two big things that we always talk about. We have this is our ladder of the logos. We have our understanding here. That's dianoia, that's the words. And we have states of mind. We also have feeling states. So we talk about our development from nihilism to relativism to materialism and so on until we actually have the truth of reality and have different levels of spiritual experiences and enlightenment. So that's our understanding, but each of them have corresponding experience. Being nihilist makes you depressed. Being a relative makes you boring ass at parties, and so on and so on. But these higher experiences have enlightenment experiences, states of mind and understanding. But here we're seeing that, hang on a second, It's the things that have not been put in words about our the parts of our problem that manifest as states of mind. Interesting. You got a negative state of mind, you're lacking a word. There's a puzzle piece your mind is giving you because it cares about you. It doesn't want you to sacrifice yourself for anything less than excellence. So it's giving you that state of mind so you can put a word on it to solve the puzzle, so you can solve the puzzle. And these states of mind are imposed upon the circumstances similar to the original insult of the Pathologocene. That's a big ass sentence, but a meaningful one. So the states of mind are imposed upon. There's our interpretation. Got no reason to be scared of that girl that you have a crush on. You have no reason to be feeling this paranoia or fear or uncertainty or whatever, doubt. But you don't have it all the time. It's on circumstances similar to those of the original insult. Notice, insult. You suffered an injustice. It's an insult against yourself to say that you're not good enough, to say your understanding is not good enough, your self-reflection, your self-understanding, your self-experience, your self-development, you pursuing your self-goals. It's an insult to say any of those are less than what's best for you. It's an insult. Your problem, your false images of yourself that diminishes yourself, the false image of reality that diminishes the knowability and care of reality, that's injustice and an insult to you and your reality. So this original insult is what causes our anger. We haven't really resolved it. We haven't put it in words. So a lot of people project their anger. You insulted me. You disrespected me. Bollocks. It's just similar enough to an original insult that you're projecting onto the scene because you haven't solved your puzzle. The intense struggle to confront and express the content of the pathologos accurately in words puts an end to the mystery. This intense struggle is our quest. It ain't easy sometimes. It's fun. It's the best thing to do. It's the most rewarding. It's what we're here for. But it can be an intense struggle to put words on it. And I know this from experience because I've seen many people give up on midwifery. Don't give up. The energy caught in that wordless phenomena is released. Oh, we can release that built up suffering or tension or, usurped energy by putting in words the mystery and the parts of the mystery that we haven't put words on yet. And our negative states of mind that we project on the world are often messages that, hey, there's a word here you haven't got. So here it is as a state of mind. Figure it out. Reflect on it. By the way, you can only put the words on it if you are reflecting on your states of mind and experiences. So you want to have a good relationship? It better all be all about reflection. By the way, it's not just reflection, it's reflection on the highest, most significant moments. The big negative states and also the big positive states. Often, when we pursue our highest goals, that our negative state comes up. So, self-reflection on our most meaningful events with words. All about words. This language that we're learning. Let's write that on the board. There's a nice triad for us to put in our skill tree. Self-reflection on most meaningful and significant experiences with logos. Words. There's our triad. Hooray. And if we do this self-reflection on what's most meaningful with this words or language, we have what we need for dialectic to solve the puzzle. To surface and readdress the origin scene. So there is a nice triad which fits under a quadrad. So that can go into your 3 skill tree, and then you can just go into your 4 skill tree that we can use later as we go and collect more skills in those 2 different skill trees. What are we noticing? Patterns of key terms that we can use to solve greater puzzles as we go. We are leveling up. Thus, the roots of the pathologos are not to be found in the unconscious, since its primary mode of existence is wordless. Your problems are not caused by your subconscious or your unconscious. It's caused by a lack of logos that you can remedy with this little ditty to reflect on what's most meaningful and significant using the words that you are learning in this podcast, and that allow you what you need to do the dialectic and solve the puzzle. So that's enough for today. We've had a couple of really long podcasts, so let's have a little bit of a shorter one. It's been about an hour and 10 minutes. So, interesting. We're seeing the significance of words, and we're also seeing what is. Our problems are solvable, knowable, and understandable so long as we learn the words and we speak up on the words and reflect on ourselves with words, on what's most meaningful with words, and our states of mind with words. It's all about words. We've also been learning about what our problems is not. It's not some irrational thing, or some subconscious thing, or unknowable thing, or mysterious thing. You can solve your problems. So going back to the question of chapter 1, why are we as a race so irrational and immature when it comes to ourselves? Well, maybe we haven't recognized this. Problems are understandable, knowable, and solvable with words, and if you don't have the words, you will blame the problems themselves, blame reality themselves, blame yourself, and make these terrible conclusions that just because I can't see it yet means it's not knowable, because look how clever I am compared to everybody else, blah 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 blah. Right? So all about words, and what isn't it? Unconscious. It's not unconscious. It's just waiting for us to solve the puzzle. And of course, if we weren't here to solve the puzzle, we'd be being spoon-fed our existence. We wouldn't be playing a game. We wouldn't be evolving. We wouldn't be leveling up. We wouldn't be a true hero on the hero's journey. So we have to be doing something. What do we do? What's our superpower? It's not a magic wand, it's words. Words. And so long as we're pursuing our highest and most meaningful goals, and we're reflecting on the experiences we undergo as we reach them, especially our positive ones and our negative ones, our successes and our blocks, and we are doing our best to speak up and use and describe with this new language we're learning, we're playing the game. Life is a game, says Alan Watts. This is the game that we are here to play, says Pierre Grimes, the noblest game. And what we are saying, yeah, well, it's the only game in town, really. So, saw a lot today. Significance of words. How to, some nice skill trees to how we solve the puzzles. but also learning about what our problems ain't. Our problems ain't unknowable, they ain't irrational, and they ain't subconscious. In fact, you might take these terms, those 3 terms, and add it to this set of 4. How does unknowable, irrational, and unconscious relate to this? And if those are 3 terms and we've got 4, what would be the missing 4th? There's another puzzle that you can use to play the game yourself. So take that puzzle with you and see how you go, and share your insights. Or, by the way, it's not about getting it right, it's about staying in the relationship. Share where you're at with us on chat. So once again, feel free to follow along on Twitch, subscribe on Twitch, or on YouTube. You can join the Discord, you get a notification when we go live, so you can share your work, your questions, and how you're going with a community of like-minded people. Rare people on the true noblest game, the human game. The game to become rational, mature, and to know and show self. What some people call entering the human race. So, lots of fun. I hope to see you next time. Bye.